Alright, so let's continue. So now we will be saving the order in the unconfirmed orders database that we created in the last part. So let's do that. Heading back to the editor, the very first thing that we have to do is to check the request method, because right now if we try to visit this endpoint, that would make a request, that would make a get request to this endpoint, and we don't want that. We only want this thing to trigger when we call it by making a post request, which will be made when the user clicks on place order button. So in order to not trigger this endpoint, this function that we have on any other method, on any other request method, we can add in a conditional check right at the top. So over here we will be checking that if the request method, by taking the first argument into consideration, because it's the request method on which we have the dot method property, which would be the method, and we can check that only if this method is of post, only then we want to proceed with the rest of the things. Otherwise we can return back an error. Let's actually do that. Else we can do return res.json, error to be of true and message to be of invalid API endpoint, something like this. And let's also set the status by chaining it over here of 404 in such a way. So now if we hit refresh, as you can see, we are getting back the error. The reason is because when we try to visit a link, that's a get request. So now let's actually proceed with the saving of order. But even before we do that, let's actually check one thing. I'm going to comment this part out so that we don't accidentally add new entries to the database. So right over here where we are sending back this text, this time we will be sending back a JSON, and the JSON is going to be the request.body. So this body is actually the data, the body that we will be sending while making the request. So we are just like, by setting it in such way, we are just saying that it should return whatever we are passing to it. So right now what we can do is we need to make a request to this endpoint of type post, and we will be sending off some data, and if it returns back the same data, then it means that this thing is working. So in order to make the request, there are many different clients out there. Like you can use Postman, Thunder client. For this case, I normally go with using an extension that I have installed called REST. So this extension, it's pretty simple. You just have to create a new file with the extension of .http, and you can make the request. It's pretty intuitive. So that's what we are going to do. Let's head back, and over here let's create a new file in the root of our project with the name of request.http. Now the file name can be anything, but let's just set it to be of request. Again, you don't have to follow up the same thing. You feel free to use any other client that you're comfortable with. You can use Postman or any other client. It's perfectly fine. So now over here, let me just quickly add the same file in the get ignore request.http, and now I'm gonna first make a get request just to see whether this thing is working, for which we just have to specify the method, in this case get, and then the URL. So now if we make a request, boom, so it's returning back what we were expecting. But now let's actually try making a post request, for which we will also, like, if you're using the same extension, then you have to do the same thing. Otherwise, I don't think you have to do that because it's sort of implicit. But I'm going to specify the content type to be of application JSON, as that's how we're going to pass the data to this endpoint as a request. So for that, we have to specify the JSON structure that we have to, like, that we are going to pass. So in this case, let me just set it to be of something like this. And now when we make the request, if it returns back the same thing, then we know that this thing is working. This entire thing is working. So now let me just make a request, and boom, so that's great. So now that this thing is working, we can work on saving the data in the database. So for that, right over here let's actually go to the index of the within the pages directory, like the home page. So let's see what exactly do we have to pass. So over here we have the cart which we need to pass, as well as the enter details form, like the entire thing. So for that, let's create a function right over here, and I'm gonna name the function to be of handle make handle. Let's name it as maybe not handle, or handle place new order. Again, you know, I'm kind of not that good with the naming part. So this function will be called when the user clicks on place order button. And right over here, let's actually install an extension which I'm going to use to make the request to the endpoint. And the package then we are going to install is Axios. So let this thing be installed, and once it is done, then we can make the request. So I'm going to import Axios right at the top. Import Axios from, do we have it? Nope. Let's wait. So now we should be having Axios. So now what we need to do right over here, we will be doing, let's make it async so that we can make use of await. So now we will be we're gonna make the request. Let's do const response await axios.post, and the request that we have to make is to this particular endpoint. Let's do that in such a way. So assuming that it's going to be on the same origin, this thing should work. And let's do one thing. Let's pass down the data for which we have the cart. So we're going to send the cart the way that it is, and also we will be sending, we're going to send the enter details form. So we won't be sending it as an object. Instead we will be spreading it out, as that makes more sense. So over here, let's spread it in such a way. And before we even do anything, let's actually wrap it up inside of try catch. I'm gonna log it for the time being to the console. And now let's actually console.log the response that we have, within which we have the data. So let's see, like if we are getting back the same thing that we are sending, then it means that this endpoint is working. So now we just need to call this function, for which we can pass it down to the cart panel, as that's where we have the button to place the order. So we can set it as place order to be of this. And let's get to the cart panel. Let's destructure this thing right at the top, and right over here we're going to send it off the way that it is, in such a way. Now we can get to the enter details panel, enter details. Let's destructure it again right at the top, and now on the place order button, let's pass it down as on click to be of this. So if we do that, and if we head back to the store, let me just open up the console so that we know if we are logging the return value to the console. So let's add something to the cart, boom, and let's continue. Then we just need to add some details. Let's put it as there something. We will be checking this thing, don't worry about it. We're going to check whether the email is valid, but before that, let's just check the rest of the things and address to be of something. So now if we click on place order, so I believe everything is working perfect, because this thing that we are getting back, it's actually coming from the server. And in order to ensure that thing, we can check the network tab, and as you can see that we were making the request to this endpoint, and the return value is this payload. The request, like what we are getting back, it's actually, one second, It's actually preview, I believe. So that is great. It means everything is working perfectly fine. And now I think we can actually save the data. Let's actually do that right now in this video. And in the next one, we will be checking the email validation. Like, we're going to check the email first before doing anything. So right over here, where we have this thing, I'm going to put down the request.body, like the entire thing in the database. However, this is not a good thing. And now that I think of it, we should not do it. We should not do that. We should only be saving the things that we expect. So I'm gonna take all these fields right over here. Now I would not get into kind of checking for like adding the validations for each of the field. However, in a production application, that thing is sort of expected and standard, but we're gonna skip that thing and just work on making this thing functional. So right over here, we have all the fields, right? So I'm gonna just add a cart as well. And right over here, we have all these things. Let's destructure them out of the request.body, place it in such a way, and let's save the same thing right over here. So now if we save it, and if we make a new order, let's open up this thing and let's actually return back response, the entire thing, response, or maybe, yeah, I think the entire thing. Let's just return it back. So now if we make a request again, let's see what's going to happen. It is pending, as I can see. Now it is okay. That's perfect. Let's see the payload and let's see the preview, actually, this thing. So as you can see, we are getting back the object that we saved. And how do we know that? Because Deta by itself, it adds the key field to the object or whatever data that you saved. And now we can confirm the same thing by refetching the entire thing, and there it is, as you can see. So I'm gonna delete the rest of the things so that it's not confusing, and let's check it out. All right, so as you can see, we are saving the entire thing. We have the card, we have the contact number, we have the mail and the full name. So that is perfect. We are actually able to store this order in the database. So now before we proceed on to the next part, which would be to confirm the order, like we will be doing the sending of email at the end, because before we even send the email, we should be making sure that the rest of the functionalities work. And the other functionality would be of confirming the order when a specific endpoint is like when a request is made to a specific endpoint with the ID, for which I believe we can use the key. So yeah, we will be doing that thing in the next video. And the very first thing that we should do is to check the email. So let's do that in the next part. Thank you.